Working in any level in IT will now require that you know PowerShell. This is necessary if you work with Windows 10, server operating systems, even if you work with the cloud, and not just the Microsoft Azure cloud. PowerShell is a pretty big component of Amazon Web Services, or AWS. There is PowerShell modules for Google Cloud Services, so this stands far beyond Microsoft, but it's not extremely difficult to learn. Now, what we'll do in this course is cover kind of the fundamentals of PowerShell and many of the things that we'll configure through the interface. I'll also show you the PowerShell equivalent syntax, so we'll kind of use both, the GUI for most things, and we'll see how those things would also execute within PowerShell. So that brings up the question, what is PowerShell? Well, PowerShell is actually a command line tool, and it's a scripting language. That's a new concept for Microsoft. In the past, Microsoft had the command prompt. Well, I'll say in the past. They still do the traditional command prompt. The command prompt is only a command line utility. That's it. You execute commands directly in it. There is no language for the command line. Scripting, we had Visual Basic. Now, there are lots of different scripts you can use, but we'll just reference Visual Basic. That is a true script language. That is not a command line utility. You don't go to Visual Basic and type individual commands, and you don't go to the command prompt and build complex scripts. So what Microsoft has done with PowerShell is essentially combine those capabilities into PowerShell. So one tool, now you can just run individual commands, and it's a full-blown scripting language that allows you to create fairly complex scripts. When we're using this utility, you can execute your PowerShell commands in the PowerShell console. Now, you could also run scripts directly from the console as well. What's most interesting about PowerShell, and I find most useful, much of the syntax. In PowerShell, we have these two terms, commandlets. Now, a commandlet is just a PowerShell command. That's it. It's going to be some command that performs a specific function. But instead of calling it a PowerShell command, I suppose that would have made too much sense. Microsoft calls it a commandlet. But anytime you see that term, commandlet, just know it's a command. Now, when most people actually talk about this, they don't use the term commandlet. I have never conversed with anyone and used the term commandlet. Everybody will say, oh, run this PowerShell command. So they're often used interchangeably. Commandlets are actually contained within modules. A module in PowerShell is a group of commandlets for a specific product that are just packaged together in these modules. Now, an example of this, if you wanted a file server, a web server, anything like that, when you go through and you install the file services role on your server, it actually loads the PowerShell module for file services. If you install the web services role, loads the module for web services. Now, these modules contain all the individual commandlets. Until that module has been loaded on your system, those PowerShell commandlets won't execute. So if I go to a server that's not a file server and I type some of these commands, they're just going to error out and tell you it's an unknown command. So the modules actually grow with the operating system. You install a role or feature on your server. If it has a PowerShell module associated with it, the module gets installed, then you can actually run the commands. We have two tools that we will use to manage PowerShell. One tool is the PowerShell console. This is, we're just going to say, equivalent to the command prompt. Just a screen where you type commands directly in PowerShell. Now, you can execute scripts as well from here. You cannot build scripts here. But if you have a PowerShell script you want to run, you can just type the path to the script and you can have it execute the script. So that's just a console. You free type whatever commands you actually want. The other tool is this PowerShell ISE, this integrated scripting environment. Many places will list it as integrated scripting engine, but Microsoft says environment. This is actually a graphical user interface, so just a GUI tool. This allows you to do a lot of different things. You can run commands like you could in the console. You can also create scripts here. If you already have a PowerShell script, you can modify scripts. You can execute scripts. So this is really the full capabilities of PowerShell in this PowerShell ISE. So those are the two tools we'll use, the console, ISE. PowerShell also has remote management capability. This allows you, from your local machine, you can remotely run PowerShell commands on another system, and they would execute as if you had ran them locally. Now, that is useful for a lot of things. I often use that for inventory. I just had a project where we needed to get the serial number and model number for about 3,000 monitors so they could get loaded into this asset management utility. The easiest way to do that was to remotely run some PowerShell commands that would query all the computers in the environment, and it would take all that information, and ultimately it wrote it all back to a spreadsheet. So that remote management is useful for numerous scenarios. Now this brings up the question, why is there PowerShell? Why don't we just keep using the command prompt? Now, we already established that the command prompt is just for running commands. Command prompt has no scripting component, where PowerShell kind of unifies command line and scripting. The other issue, though, the command prompt just does not make a lot of sense, actually. Now, some of you may have experience using a lot of these commands already. Some of you may be a little newer to IT. So I listed some of the most basic commands. Now, many home users are even familiar with some of these commands. Ping is one of the most common commands you'll use on any Windows system. What ping does is test connectivity. If I want to verify that I can connect to another computer on the network, I want to verify I can connect to a website, I could simply type ping, the name of that site. So if I type ping rtsnetworking.com, what we expect to get is a reply. Now, by default, you'll get 4 replies. If I wanted this to be continuous, I could use ping-t rtsnetworking.com, and that means this will just ping forever until you stop it or exit out of the command prompt. It won't just ping 4 times and stop, it just keeps going. Now, we don't really care about ping. What we care about is the syntax. If you want any type of modification with ping, then you'd use these parameters, but it's always going to be ping dash something, like ping dash t in this case. That sounds easy enough to remember. Well, if we move on to the next command, ipconfig. Now, you run this just to view your IP configuration. If I want to know my IP address, all the other IP settings, several parameters you can use with this. But the parameters that you use are all going to be slash something, like slash all in this case, shows you the full IP configuration. Now, if you work in IT, you remember that. It's not a big deal, or so it seems. But the problem, these 2 commands are extremely common, but the syntax is completely unique to each command. So it's not as if you could go learn syntax for the command line. You had to learn each individual command because many commands have unique syntax. Another example is this dispart utility. With the dispart utility, it has syntax that is only used within dispart. So if you truly wanted to use that, you would have to go out and actually study specifically the dispart utility to see exactly what the commands are just for that one utility. Now, to put a face to these, I'm going to switch to the command prompt for one moment. On my system, I'm just going to go to Start, and on my Start menu, I'm just going to type CMD. That's going to pull up the command prompt, and I'm just going to maximize that in full screen. I'm going to type ping rtsnetworking.com. Move my cursor there. That executes with no issue. I get 4 replies as we said. Now, if we were to type ping -t RTS networking.com, it just keeps going. It'll run forever. Now, I don't need this to run forever, so I'm going to use Control-C, and that actually breaks that, so it'll stop running. If we run ipconfig, I get my basic IP configuration. To look at the help syntax for these, I'm going to run ipconfig /?. This gives me all the syntax I can use for ipconfig. So you'll see the /all / renew release. Now, we don't care what they do. We're just looking at the syntax. If I type ping /?, all the syntax here is -something, -FIVRS. Now, do notice, I'm going to hit the up arrow just to recycle that through the history. It does not matter with ping if you have a space or not. So ping /?, ping /?, with or without a space in between the end of the ping and the slash, does not matter, executes the same. I only say that because sometimes I just inadvertently put a space, sometimes I don't, just don't want that to confuse anyone. So that just verifies the syntax is different with the parameters. Now if I type this part, it actually opens a completely separate window. Now, as you can see, I'm in the dispart utility, and now I could only run dispart commands. Well, here, if I type ipconfig here, notice it doesn't give me anything related to my IP configuration. What it does is list all the possible commands I could have typed. That's basically its way of saying, you just messed up. Here's a list of the things you could have typed. The command you just typed is just not one of those things. So pretty interesting that is. But that's our main issue with the command prompt. You can't really learn the syntax because you have to learn it for each individual command, so you spend a lot of time on Google for some of the things you may not use that often. When we switch to PowerShell, PowerShell syntax is always going to be verb-noun. That already makes it a lot easier to understand, just knowing that verb-noun. Now, when I initially saw this verb-noun, I had flashbacks of like 3rd grade English class, and I thought I would hate PowerShell. I was mistaken. I absolutely love PowerShell and use it on almost a daily basis. But we just know it's always going to be a verb, like test, get, enable, disable, set, -noun, the thing that you actually want to manage. If I wanted to ping, the equivalent of ping in PowerShell, verb-noun, test-connection is our verb-noun and the name of the thing that you actually want to ping. If you want to modify it with parameters, parameters in PowerShell will always be -something. So that same command, test-connection, rtsnetworking.com -count10. Now that'll make it reply, well, it'll send 10 ping requests, which we call echo requests, and it'll get 10 replies. So here you do have to specify a number, it just won't run continuously, but that would really be the equivalent. If I wanted to look at my event log, verb-noun, get-event log. If I want to look at a specific log, get-event log -log name system would show me the contents of the system log. Pretty user-friendly. Now to take a look at that, I'm going to switch to PowerShell for a moment. So I'm just going to go to my Start menu, and I have my PowerShell console. Now this is pretty small, so I'm actually going to go click on the little PowerShell icon here, and in Properties, I'm going to choose 28 for my size. So a little easier to see. Well, if we run that test-connection, rtsnetworking.com, we get 4 replies. I'm going to hit the up arrow to bring up the history. If I run that with a count, I would say 10. It's just going to ping 10 times. Same exact end result if you were to do ping. It's same type of traffic. You get a response, I know I'm connected. Output looks a little different, and the syntax is just different. Now, what Microsoft has done, they know a command like ping is so common that people will still use it. If you're in PowerShell, you can still type ping. Works just like you're in the command prompt. Microsoft refers to these as grandfathered commands, meaning they're just carried over and they execute the same here. So a lot of common commands, ipconfig would work here as well. Now, this is only true of some of the most common Windows commands, but they'll all actually have their PowerShell counterparts. For example, get net IP address. If I type that, I get all the information related to my IP address. A lot of overlap with what you actually receive from the ipconfig itself. Pretty user-friendly. One thing I love about PowerShell has tab completion. So let's say I type get-event. Actually, I'm going to backspace a bit. I'm going to type get-ev, and I'm going to hit tab. It auto-completes that. Now, this is actually called IntelliSense is what it's actually called, but many people call it tab completion, but truly IntelliSense. I'm going to hit tab again. You see it says get event, but I'm going to hit tab again. It goes to get-event log. If we tab again, get-event subscriber, back to get-event. So what this tells me, there are only 3 commands, get event, event log, event subscriber, that actually start with get-ev. If your spelling is like mine, that's a great way to actually help yourself out. But if I run get-event log, that is a complete PowerShell commandlet, but we're going to call it a command. Verb-noun. But we would agree, if you run that, you're missing some crucial components. You have multiple event logs on your machine, so you can't just run the command because it does not know what log you want. The log name is a required parameter in PowerShell. So what I'm going to do is hit enter. And notice it automatically prompts me for the log name. Now I'm going to type system. And it's going to execute this when I hit enter. Now I'm going to hit Control-C to stop that, because if not, it'll just run forever. But if we look at that again, it knows you have to specify a log name, so it actually prompts you for it. Many commands will actually work this way. Very user-friendly. Now I'm going to hit Control-C there again to stop that. But if we go back to the get-event log, this IntelliSense is so powerful in PowerShell. I'm going to type dash. I can hit tab, and it cycles through every parameter that I can actually use. So if I wanted events before a certain date, events related to a specific username, any of these, and it's a lot of things there, but it could be related to a specific computer name. You could simply tab through all of those. So you don't really have to know what it is you intend to do, or you don't have to know the syntax. You can literally dash, tab your way through it. But I'm going to use log name. But it gets even better. Dash log name, if I hit tab, it actually, through this IntelliSense, it knows I type get-event log dash log name. So now I can simply hit tab, and it'll tab through my event logs. Pretty fascinating. Makes it very user-friendly to actually use. Now you could be thinking, how did I even know get event log was the command I needed to use? Well, in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at how we figure that out by using the help parameters.